You can take on the absolute hordes of goblins coming your way by building the entire Goblin Slayer party to take on that insane goblin army. And considering the absolute brutality that they come at you with, you gotta be prepared. We're gonna build every member of the Goblin Slayer party from beginning to end, and if you want to follow along, I have character sheets available in a link down below. Also linked down there is my brand new free newsletter I named the Nat 20 newsletter, so check it out. And it's kind of weird because everything in this show is just referred to as the title essentially that they have. So we have Goblin Slayer, Priestess, High Elf Archer, the Dwarf Shaman, and the Lizard Priest that are all going to be built out here. And we got to move through these quickly, otherwise I wind up with a 3-hour video and I'm going to be editing for weeks. So let's dive in with the obvious leader of the party, Goblin Slayer himself. You got to grab the species human, that way we get a feat right away, and it's just what Goblin Slayer is, but the feat we're going to grab is tough. You're taking on tons and tons of goblins, initially solo, so in order to deal with that, you need a lot of health, and tough gives you an extra 2 hit points of health per level of your overall build. We get an extra skill by being a human, and then we're going to go with athletics, and we also get a heroic inspiration once per long rest, meaning we get to re-roll a d20. Now I wanted to stick as much as possible with the 2024 and later stuff from D&D, so I'm not going to be going with Haunted One, which I think my friends over at Dungeon Master's Domain actually went with, which I actually checked in with them to try and not step on any toes and not duplicate any work, but they have an awesome video about this. It is super great. I highly recommend it. But to try and stick with the newer stuff, I'm going to go with Wayfarer. It's all about ill-fated cast-offs that have kind of wound up on their own, and considering Goblin Slayer's entire family was massacred right in front of his eyes while he was hiding underneath the floorboards, that's kind of where you wind up. This gives you proficiency in insight and stealth, and it gives you the feat Lucky, so you can actually re-roll a number of d20 dice equal to your proficiency bonus, which reset on a long rest, and you can also impose disadvantage in the same fashion. We'll have some ability scores that wind up like this, with a decently wide spread because we're going to have a bit of an interesting build going forward. When it comes to a starting class, we need to make sure you hate goblins, because obviously that's your thing. They're quite literally your favorite enemy, if favorite is the right word. And there's a class that has a favored enemy, and that's a ranger. But before we dive into the favored enemy feature, there's other reasons that make starting as a ranger the perfect beginning for Goblin Slayer. First, they get proficiency in light and medium armor. And Goblin Slayer never wears more than medium armor because it's harder for him to move and be mobile while in confined spaces if he wears any heavy armor. So having medium armor is absolutely perfect. We also get proficiency with all weapons, which Goblin Slayer is pretty proficient with basically everything that he comes in contact with, and we get 3 skills when we choose to be a ranger. So we're going to grab perception so that way no goblins take you by surprise, and then investigation and survival, mostly for tracking goblins in the first place. You get some spells right at first level of being a ranger, and there's not a lot of spell casting that Goblin Slayer actually does. He just uses spell scrolls or potions, so we're going to replicate that a tiny bit. Otherwise, we're focusing just on abilities that don't seem too magical. So grab Cure Wounds in case you want to pretend that you're drinking a backup health potion that you have handy. Snare to set a trap for the goblins and string them up and ready for you to absolutely slay them. Zephyr Strike to dash through a goblin, just slashing the crap out of them. And then of course, we're going to grab Hunter's Mark, so you can mark an enemy, getting a boost of an extra d6 of damage on every attack against them. And that ties in to the other first feature you get from being a ranger, favored enemy. This used to actually require that you decide what type of enemy is your favorite, or in this case most hated enemy, but in 2024 it got a bit of an update. Now this makes it so you always have the Hunter's Mark spell prepared, and you can cast it a certain number of times for free. Then the last thing at first level of Ranger is a weapon mastery. We get 2 of them right away, and he's very iconically wielding a short sword most of the time, so that's what we're going to grab weapon mastery with, and that gives us the feature Vex. So when you hit a creature with your short sword, you can have advantage on your next attack against that creature. We also see him kind of wielding a club because it's usually what he picks up from random goblins, so I'll grab that as well, which gives us the feature Slow. obviously allowing you to slow down a goblin you smack. At second level of Ranger, we get Deft Explorer, so we get 2 languages. We'll grab Elvish and Dwarvish because they join your party later, and we get Expertise in a skill, so we'll grab Perception to make sure that absolutely no goblin is going to sneak up on you. Then the next feature you get at second level of Ranger is a fighting style, and we need to focus more on survivability than anything else, especially at level 2. So we're going to grab Defense, giving us an extra 1 armor class to any armor we wear, because we are going to be wearing medium armor and wielding a shield. The strongest medium armor we can get is half plate and a shield to give us another +2 on top of that armor class. We'll have other ways to boost up our medium armor a little later, but let's keep going through the build because at level 3 we get to choose a subclass. So we're going to grab Hunter. This gives us the feature Hunter's Lore. So any creature that's targeted by your Hunter's Mark spell, you get to know all of their immunities, resistances, vulnerabilities, and everything you need about them. And considering how much you study goblins, that's pretty relevant to the character. Also at third level of being a Hunter Ranger, you get the feature Hunter's Prey, allowing you to amplify your style of combat, choosing either Colossus Slayer to boost up your damage once per turn, or Horde Breaker. Considering goblins usually swarm you and attack in a giant horde, Horde Breaker is probably the better fit. This allows you to attack a second target within 5 feet of your original target when you take the attack action, as long as you haven't attacked that second target yet this turn. Meaning that when you're fighting a horde, which you are often doing against goblins, you already get 2 attacks per turn. Then at 4th level of being a ranger, you get an ability score improvement, but we're going to take a feat right away, because I want to take Medium Armor Master. It is a big focus that you're able to maximize the use of using medium armor. So this allows us to boost up either our strength or dexterity. We're going to boost up our dexterity, and then we get the feature Dexterous Wearer. So now when you're wearing medium armor, usually you're only allowed to add a +2 from the modifier of dexterity for your armor class. Dexterous Wearer allows you to add up to +3, as long as your dexterity is at least a 16. So now with the shield, medium armor master, and having the defense armor class, we can actually have an armor class of up to 21. And most goblins aren't going to be able to get past that. Then at 5th level of ranger, we get extra attacks, so now you can attack twice per attack action, and you get access to 2nd level spells. Deal with goblin traps, we'll grab Find Traps, and to sneak up on goblins, we'll grab Pass Without Trace, which really boosts up your stealth checks. At 6th level of ranger, you get Roving, allowing you to boost your movement speed by 10 feet, while also giving you climbing and swimming speeds equal to your walking speed. And then at 7th level of ranger, you get Defensive Tactics from being a hunter. And you can choose something like multi-attack defense, which would make it so anytime somebody hits you with an attack, any follow-up attacks are going to be at disadvantage. But usually you're fighting a ton of goblins which only get 1 attack most of the time, so instead we're going to grab Escape the Horde. You don't run away a lot, but sometimes you need to move through goblins to get to the best position to do as many attacks as possible. Escape the Horde makes it so any opportunity attacks against you are going to be at disadvantage. You can swap out both of these hunter features every long rest if you want to though. Then at 8th level of ranger, you get another ability score improvement, so we're going to boost up our strength by 2 points. I wanted to boost up our strength because most of the time Goblin Slayer is doing melee combat and he's picking up whatever's relevant to him. And if he doesn't have a short sword or a scimitar or a dagger or any other finesse weapon, chances are it's going to be a strength-based weapon. Not to mention, if you want to strangle a giant goblin, that's going to be a heavy-duty strength check. So I want that to be the focus going forward. And then we're going to do a multi-class. And the last time I built Goblin Slayer, people were recommending that I go with Barbarian for the whole red eye thing, but I think he's a bit too tactical to do something like that, so we're going to jump over to Fighter. This gives us another fighting style right away, so we're going to take Dueling. You almost always have a shield on one arm, so you need to boost up the damage, especially when you're only wielding a short sword. Dueling boosts up the damage of a one-handed weapon by +2. You also get the feature Second Wind at 1st level of fighter, so you can take a bonus action to recover some health equal to 1d10 plus your fighter level. Then the last thing you get at 1st level of fighter is some more weapon masteries. And I know we're focusing mostly on strength, but we still need some ranged attacks. So I'm going to grab our short bow, which gives us the feature Vex again. Daggers, because you just always need to be good with daggers. And that gives us Nick, allowing us to make an offhand attack, which usually takes makes your bonus action, but instead you can make it part of your action, freeing up your bonus action for something else. And then the last thing I'm going to grab is a battle axe, which gives us topple, allowing you to give the chance to knock down one of your enemies. At second level of fighter, we get action surge, allowing us to take 2 actions in a single turn, once per short or long rest. And also at this level, we get tactical mind. So if you fail an ability check, you can add a D10 by spending one of your uses of second wind, and you can also add your fighter level to it, so it's pretty rare that you're going to fail if you use this. At third level of fighter, you get a fighter subclass, and like I said, he's pretty tactical. So we're going to grab Battle Master. This gives us tons of battle tactics. Not to mention, it gives us superiority die. Because the feature Combat Superiority allows us to use maneuvers, which are special battle tactics, and spend a superiority die on them. Which really makes me think of those moments when things get really intense, really serious in the Goblin Slayer show, and you see those dice start to roll. You get to learn a few maneuvers right now, but you get to learn more as you level up in fighter. But the superiority die that you roll when you do these special battle tactics is a D8, which is probably technically worse than what you see in the show because they get to roll 2d6 instead. So a D8 is generally worse, but still it's more dice to roll. The 3 maneuvers we're going to learn right away is riposte. So when an enemy misses you with an attack, you can spend a superiority die to use your reaction to attack them while adding that die to the damage. We'll grab menacing attack to scare the crap out of those goblins, inflicting the frightened condition. The last maneuver we're going to grab is sweeping attack because you are attacking multiple creatures pretty darn often between your horde breaker and your extra attacks, and however many times you're going to wind up hitting a bunch of goblins. Sweeping attack allows you to hit more than one creature at the same time. The last thing you get at third level of being a Battlemaster fighter is Student of War. So we get proficiency in 1 type of tools and 1 additional skill. So the skill we're going to grab is Intimidation, so you can scare the crap out of those goblins even more. And we'll also grab Alchemist tools because you like to combine some stuff to help blow up goblins. At 4th level of fighter, you get another weapon mastery, so we'll just grab a mace because I'm running out of smaller weapons to attack people with in close combat, and the mace gives us the feature Sap, so any creature you hit with it has disadvantage on their next attack roll. At 4th level of fighter, we get another ability score improvement, so let's go ahead and boost up our strength again by 2 more points. 5th level of fighter would give us extra attack, but we already have that from being a ranger, so unfortunately we don't get anything here, except for the feature Tactical Shift, so when you use your second wind to regain some hit points, you can move half of your movement speed and at the same time not provoke any opportunity attacks. 6th level of fighter will give us another ability score improvement, so we're going to boost up our strength again. 7th level, being a Battle Master fighter, gives us Know Your Enemy, so that way if you run out of uses of Hunter's Mark to learn tons of stuff from the Hunter's Lore feature, you can actually just use this feature instead a number of times equal to your proficiency bonus, understanding a bunch of resistances, vulnerabilities, or immunities that any goblin might have. You also get 1 additional superiority die to spend at this level, and you get to learn 2 more maneuvers. So we'll grab Rally to boost up your allies with a bit of temp HP, and Trip Attack to knock down your enemies. Then at 8th level of fighter, you get another ability score improvement, so let's go ahead and boost up your Constitution by 2 points because you need some survivability, and we have most of the other stats that we need at this point. 9th level of fighter gives us Tactical Master, so you can replace any weapon mastery feature you already have on a weapon with push, sap, or slow. Also at 9th level, we get Indomitable, so you can re-roll a saving throw with an amount equal to your fighter level on top of it. You can only use this once per long rest, but that plus your lucky feat means you're very rarely ever going to fail a saving throw. 10th level of fighter gives you another weapon mastery, so we'll just grab a Warhammer so you can just smack goblins that much harder, which gives us the feature Push, so you can push goblins away at the same time. And if you use a feature like this, you can actually push away 3 goblins between Horde Breaker and your extra attack, but that actually gets boosted up in just a second too. But first, you got to get improved combat superiority. So those superiority die that you have to spend are now upgraded to a D10 instead of a D8, and you get to learn 2 more maneuvers. So we'll grab Parry, so you can parry an attack coming at you, and that just gives you a bit more defense. And then we'll also grab Distracting Strike, giving you advantage and boosting your damage on an attack. Then at 11th level of fighter, you get another extra attack. So now you can attack 3 times per action, and if you're attacking a horde of creatures, which you will often be doing, you can attack 1 more creature on top of that, so you get 4 attacks in a single attack action. Then at 12th level fighter, you get another ability score improvement, but we're at max level of the overall build, so we get to choose an epic boon, and we want to make sure we have tons and tons of health. So we're going to grab the Boon of Fortitude. This allows us to boost our constitution by 1 more point, and it gives Goblin Slayer an extra 40 hit points of health. And on top of that, whenever he regains some hit points, he gets to add his constitution modifier to the amount he regains. But now that we've finished off the leader of the party, Goblin Slayer himself, let's get the next addition to the party, the Priestess. Now again, I reached out to the guys over at Dungeon Master Guide, and they are super awesome and super friendly, and I like what they did. They had a good idea with going with a warlock, because warlocks get a great spell called Wall of Light, and that seems very iconic for what Priestess does in Goblin Slayer. However, I just couldn't bring myself to make her a warlock, and I find it very weird that a certain class does not get that spell. So we're gonna have to reflavor a different spell a little bit, but that's okay, we'll figure it out. Because instead, I gotta go with a cleric. I mean, she's still gonna be a human, and she's still gonna get a feat, so I'm gonna give her the healer feat, just because it seems really fitting, which gives you a healer's kit you can use, but I don't care as much about that, as much as I care about healing rerolls, because that makes it so when you're healing someone with any sort of spell or healing kit or anything like that, you can actually re-roll any 1 on the healing you're doing, but you have to use the new roll. We also get a background, and we're gonna grab Acolyte because you're basically part of a religion, and that's kind of your thing, which gives us the feature Magic Initiate, which gives us 2 cantrips and 1 spell from the cleric class. We'll grab Guidance and Resistance, and the spell we'll grab is Shield of Faith to help protect your allies, because that's kind of your thing. Then when it comes to a class, like I mentioned, we're going with a cleric. I need you to be one of the best healers in the game, but I do want to focus on some aspects of her style. Speaking of style, when it comes to what she wears, it usually looks like a robe, but underneath she's usually wearing some chainmail, which happens to be medium armor. And clerics get proficiency in that. You can upgrade it with your level 1 feature, Divine Order, where you can choose to be more of a battle cleric and get access to heavy armor, but we don't really want that. Instead, we're going to go with Thaumaturge. So when you make any Arcana or Religion check, you can actually add your Wisdom modifier to the roll. Also at first level cleric, you get some spell casting. So when it comes to cantrips, we're going to grab some of the basics. We need Light because she does a lot of light stuff. We'll grab Spare the Dying to help save your allies. Word Radiance to blast everything around you with some damaging light. And Toll the Dead just because it's a pretty solid damage dealing cantrip. And also because you chose Thaumaturge for your Divine Order, you get to learn 1 more cantrip. So we'll grab Sacred Flame. It's just another light to throw out and damage a creature, but I'm going to save all the first level spells for just a second because you get access to a whole bunch more spells once we get to choose a subclass. So at 2nd level Cleric, you get Channel Divinity, which allows you to use Divine Spark, which allows you to just straight up damage a creature if you need to, dealing necrotic or radiant damage, dealing a d8 plus your Wisdom modifier, but you can also swap that out to heal a creature for the same amount. You can also use this against undead, but we don't care much about undead, we just care about goblins. You also get a different use for it because at 3rd level of Cleric, you get to choose a Cleric subclass, and she is so focused on shining light to damage enemies or help her allies or whatever. So we're going to grab the Light Domain Cleric. The style of most of the combat really feels more like a light cleric to me. This gives us a bunch more spells, which is why I waited a second to cover any of them, because at 3rd level of cleric you also get access to 2nd level spells. So let's run through all of the 1st and 2nd level spells I would give her. We automatically get Burning Hands from being a light cleric, but we'll also grab Command to stop an enemy in their tracks or tell them to flee or whatever. And this is also helpful for when you have to stop all of the enemies from attacking with that Shield of Light, which the only way to really recreate that is with a Wall of Force, and only wizards get that spell, so I don't really want to go with that route. We'll grab Cure Wounds for some healing because you're a healer. Fairy Fire to illuminate the area, but also give advantage on attacks against an entire group of enemies if you need to. Guiding Bolt to just send out a radiant bolt of light to damage your enemies. Healing Word for a bonus action heal. 2nd level, we automatically get Scorching Ray from being a light cleric because they get some fire-based stuff, but we'll pretend all the fire-based stuff is more light-based instead. And speaking of light, we'll also make sure we illuminate any invisible targets with C invisibility, and then silence to shut down any goblin spellcasters. We also get 2 additional features from being a light cleric. The first is called Radiance of the Dawn, so you can flash a light within 30 feet of you. It dispels magical darkness, and it just illuminates an entire area, and any creature of your choice has to make a Constitution saving throw in that area. Otherwise, they take 2d10 plus your cleric level in damage. The other feature you get is Warding Flare. So any creature that makes an attack roll within 30 feet of you, you can force them to roll a disadvantage by flaring some light a number of times equal to your Wisdom modifier. 4th level of Cleric gives us an ability score improvement, which I know I didn't even cover the ability scores, but I'm trying to get through this as fast as possible. Here's the starting ability scores, and we're going to boost up our Constitution and Wisdom by 1 point each. 5th level being a Cleric gives us Seer Undead for another way to damage undead creatures, but we don't care about that. We just care about slaying goblins. Also at 5th level, we get access to 3rd level spells. We'll grab Daylight for the whole shining a light thing and blinding a bunch of enemies, and by default we also get Fireball, so we're going to be able to just nuke an entire area if we need to. But we need one more healing ability, so we'll grab Mass Healing Word. 6th level of being a light cleric gives us improved Warding Flare, so we regain all of our uses of Warding Flare on a short or long rest instead of having to wait for a long rest, and any creature we're trying to protect with our Warding Flare gets a number of temporary hit points equal to 2d6 plus your Wisdom modifier. 7th level of Cleric gives us Blessed Strikes, so we can boost up our cantrip damage with potent spellcasting or our melee damage with a weapon. We don't care about weapon attacks that much, so we'll boost up our cantrips instead, allowing us to add our Wisdom modifier to any damage with a cleric cantrip. Also at 7th level, we get access to 4th level spells, so we'll grab Aura of Life to heal all our allies around us constantly. It's generally just a pretty awesome spell, and to have a wall protecting our allies because we don't get Wall of Light or Wall of Force. We instead get Wall of Fire from being a light cleric. We'll just have to reflavor it as just a Wall of Light because that's just what we got to do at this point. But hey, it's still a way to damage a bunch of enemies at the same time, burning the crap out of them. 8th level of Cleric gives us another ability score improvement, so we'll boost up our Wisdom score by 2 more points. 9th level of Cleric gives us access to 5th level spells, so we'll grab Mass Cure Wounds for another mass healing ability, Scrying so that way you can help understand what's going to happen by praying to your goddess, and because I wanted another way to block your enemies from getting to you, we'll grab Blade Barrier. It literally just pops up a bunch of blades to stop your enemies from coming at you, and when you have a horde of goblins rushing your way, it's gonna be helpful. Then at 10th level of Cleric, you get Divine Intervention, and this used to be a way to reach out to your god or goddess directly, but it kinda doesn't do that anymore in 2024. Now you can choose any cleric spell of 5th level or lower that doesn't require a reaction to cast, and as part of the same action, you can cast it for free. And on top of that, it won't even require any material components, which can be very good for something like Revivify, which takes like a diamond for you to resurrect somebody, but not having to pay for a diamond is kind of helpful. You can only use this feature once per long rest, and considering how limited spellcasting is in the Goblin Slayer universe, that can be a massive lifesaver. Like, we can already cast way more spells than they ever could in the show because they can only cast like 2 or 4 spells a day. It's absolutely nuts. Then at 11th level of Cleric, we get access to 6th level spells. We'll grab another healing spell with Heal, and we'll grab another Blast of Light type of thing with Sunbeam. 12th level of Cleric gives us another ability score improvement, so we're going to grab Resilient, which allows us to pick 1 ability score. So we're going to boost up our Constitution by 1 point. Then we get proficiency in saving throws with that ability score. And Priestess is constantly having to concentrate on a spell far longer than she thinks she's able to. So I want to make sure she has a little bit of help there. And having proficiency in Constitution saving throws is going to help with your concentration checks by a lot. In fact, it actually helps even more than having advantage on that concentration check, like something like Warcaster would give you, at least statistically. Then at 13th level of Cleric, you get access to 7th level spells. So we'll grab Divine Word to really utter a prayer to your god or goddess, and Power Word Fortify to really boost up your party in the most drastic way you can at the moment, giving up to 120 hit points that you can split amongst your party. It's all temp HP though. And then we'll also grab Regenerate because it's honestly one of the best healing spells that makes you basically unkillable for a little bit. 14th level gives us Improved Blessed Strikes, which would boost up our melee damage if we wanted to do that, but we care more about the spell casting, so we get Improved Potent Spell Casting. But this is a little different. It really focuses on you being a healer. So when you damage a creature with a cleric cantrip, you can also heal somebody else with some temp HP at the same time, granting you or anybody within 60 feet of you a number of temp HP equal to twice your wisdom modifier. 15th level of cleric boosts up our spellcasting to 8th level, so we'll grab Holy Aura and Sunburst for another just blinding attack. 16th level of cleric gives us another ability score improvement, so we'll boost up our constitution score by 2 more points. 17th level of cleric gives us another feature from being a light cleric called Corona of Light, so you can emit a blinding aura for a minute, forcing any enemies within 30 feet of you to have disadvantage on any saving throws against spells that would deal fire or radiant damage. And you can use this feature a number of times equal to your wisdom modifier per long rest. Then at 18th level of cleric, you finally get 9th level spells. So we're just going to keep it simple. You're a healer. We're going to grab Mass Heal. It's one of the most powerful healing spells in the game. And considering how beat up this party gets at times, that's definitely going to be a lifesaver. The 19th level of Cleric is going to give us an epic boon. And I wanted to focus on the idea that in the Goblin Slayer universe, the amount of spellcasting a spellcaster can do is super limited. So we're going to grab the boon of Spell Recall to really help with that idea. So we can throw 1 point into Wisdom for whatever reason, because we don't have anything else to do with 1 more point. And whenever you cast a spell using a spell slot of 1st through 4th level, you can roll a d4. And if you happen to roll the number equal to whatever your spell slot you used was, you don't use that spell slot. And then finally, at max level of being a cleric, you get Greater Divine Intervention. So when you use your Divine Intervention feature, you can actually choose Wish when you choose the spell to get for free. Understandably, it is a very powerful spell to use. You are required to do 2d4 worth of long rest before you can use that feature again. Now it's time to dive into the rest of the party that joins Goblin Slayer later in the show. And let's start with the guy who's going to be helping him on the front lines as much as possible, the Lizard Priest. The Lizard Priest is kind of an interesting addition to the party because 1, he's a lizard, 2, he summons a bone sword thing that he swings in battle, and he's up front being in melee while at the same time being a priest that can summon draconic bones to help him out and help fight alongside him. And I love this character. So starting with the species, he's Lizard Priest. We're going to choose Lizard Folk. And the only feature of being a Lizard Folk that we really care about is that we have a natural armor by default. So our armor class equals 13 plus our dexterity modifier, and we can wield the shield on top of that if we ever had the access to it. Because you're a lizard, you have hard, scaly skin. Then when it comes to a background, we're going to grab Acolyte again. You're a Lizard Priest. Being an Acolyte kind of makes sense. And this is actually very helpful because he needs a little bit of healing, and this gives us the Magic Initiate feat to dive into the Cleric spell list a tiny bit. So we'll grab Guidance for a cantrip. We'll also grab Thaumaturgy because he has the ability Dragon's Roar to just boom out his voice, and Thaumaturgy is kind of a good way to do that. Then we also get access to a 1st level spell, so we'll grab Cure Wounds because he does have some healing ability. When it comes to the ability scores, we're going to have a point spread that looks like this, and then diving into the class, between how he uses his sword and the fact that he can summon some skeletons, I'm going to go with a Warlock, and I'm going to find ways to make him really good on the front lines without going with something like a Hexblade. And right at 1st level of being a Warlock, you get Pact Magic, which is a special kind of spell casting that only Warlocks get access to because their spell slots recharge on a short rest, but they have a very limited amount of spell slots, which is actually much more fitting for the Goblin Slayer universe. However, they are always cast at their maximum strength, but also at 1st level of Warlock, you get an Eldritch Invocation right away, which we need to cover first. And you summon a sword into existence that you use pretty regularly fighting along Goblin Slayer on the front lines. So we're going to grab Pact of the Blade. This allows you to summon a weapon that you are proficient with by default, and you can use your spellcasting modifier for your attack and damage rolls, meaning we really only have to worry about boosting up our charisma from now on, and then our dexterity for boosting up your armor class later. And when it comes to spells, we want to focus on stuff that's going to help us on the front lines. We'll grab Sword Burst to attack everything around us all at once in case we get surrounded by the horde of goblins. We'll grab Blade Ward for a bit more defense to add to ourselves, allowing us to remove a D4 from attack rolls from enemies. And then something like True Strike in case we would just want to hit once really hard. Then when it comes to first level spells, we're only going to grab Hex. We just want to boost up our attack damage a little bit. Second level of Warlock gives us 2 more Eldritch Invocations. I'm only going to cover the invocations that really matter for the Lizard Priest, so there will be a bit of wiggle room here. And we want to make sure at level 2 we're able to survive the entire onslaught we're going to be dealing with from the horde of goblins as much as possible. So we're going to grab Fiendish Vigor, allowing us to cast False Life on ourselves at will, which gives us a little bit of extra temp HP as a shield. And then we'll also grab Lessons of the First Ones, which allows us to choose an origin feat. So we're going to choose Tough, giving us an extra 2 hit points of health per level of this overall build. Then third level of Warlock, we get to choose a subclass. And there's a few great options. We could go with something more undead-like, because we can summon skeletons, but I want to really focus on our survivability as much as possible. So despite the fact that we're not seeing a ton of fire attacks, which is kind of what this subclass is known for, it does help our survivability. So we're going to choose the patron for our subclass to be a fiend. By becoming a fiend warlock, we get Dark One's Blessing. So when you reduce an enemy to 0 hit points, or somebody else does within 10 feet of you, you get some temp HP equal to your charisma modifier plus your warlock level, which is a ton of temp HP, and that will constantly be regenerating because the real danger of goblins is that they're attacking you in a horde. They're easy to kill for the most part. You just gotta deal with numbers more than anything. So if every time you slay a goblin, you're gaining some temp HP as a shield, that's gonna massively boost your survivability. You also get some fiend spells by choosing the subclass, but they're mostly fire spells. We don't care too much about those. Then the last thing you get at level 3 is that your spell casting gets upgraded to 2nd level spells. So assume it's a bunch of swirling bones and cast Cloud of Daggers, get another type of weapon in your hand with Shadow Blade, or hold a goblin still while you attack the crap out of them, getting crits on every melee attack with Hold Person, or give you a bit more defense with Mirror Image. At 4th level of Warlock, we get an ability score improvement, so boost up your charisma by 2 points. At 5th level of Warlock, you get some more Eldritch Invocations, so grab Thirsting Blade so you can attack twice with your packed weapon, and Eldritch Smite so that way you can expend a spell slot to just really smash down on a goblin, dealing a whole bunch more damage based off of the level of the spell slot you used. Also at 5th level, you get access to 3rd level spells so we can finally summon those dragon skeleton things to help you out. By grabbing the spell, Summon Undead. There are also things that will help our survivability like Vampiric Touch. We can know more languages with the spell Tongues, or boost up our damage with all of our melee attacks with Spirit Shroud, or confuse the horde of goblins with something like Enemies Abound so they'll all start attacking each other. Then instead of painstakingly going through this level by level anymore, let's speedrun this part. We'll focus on the important features to grab because we need to get through 2 more characters, and I need to do it before my voice runs out. So you get features like Dark One's Own Luck, so that we can add a D10 to a failed ability check or saving throw, possibly turning it into a success. You get Contact Patron, allowing you to contact your Fiend Patron, but that doesn't matter for a Lizard Priest at all. 10th level gives you Fiendish Resilience, so that way you can have resistance to a particular type of damage, and it just so happens that the Lizard Priest is resistant to poison damage, so that's the damage type we're going to choose most of the time. Higher level spells will get us things like Dance Macabre, so we can actually summon more skeletons simultaneously. And we also get things like a Mystic Arcanum, so we can cast a 6th level spell like Create Undead, a 7th level spell like Finger of Death, which allows you to attack a creature with a bunch of necrotic energy, and if they die, they're immediately resurrected as a skeleton under your control. You also get the feature Hurl Through Hell, which would allow you to send a creature down to hell to get a bunch of damage and then bringing them back up. That doesn't apply too much to Lizard Priest, it's just a really awesome feature. The 8th level Mystic Arcanum we'll grab is Power Word Stun, because that's the only thing that can mostly fit with the Lizard Priest, but it will help you in melee attacking. But one thing that will definitely help you a ton is the Mystic Arcanum of 9th level, which would be Foresight, giving you advantage on everything while giving all of your enemies disadvantage on anything against you. We'll also make sure to boost up your survivability with your Epic Boon, giving you the Boon of Fortitude for an extra 40 hit points. And then finally at 20th level you get Eldritch Master, so you did have the ability to regain half of the amount of spell slots you had spent as just an action, but this allows you to regain all of them as an action instead. When it comes to the rest of the Eldritch Invocations, honestly, I don't care about too much of them. There's only two you really want to make sure you grab, which are Life Drinker, boosting up your damage that you can deal with an extra d6 per turn, and allowing you to regain some hit points equal to whatever you roll on a hit die, plus your Constitution modifier, which does really help with the Boon of Fortitude, which allows you to regain extra health. And then the other thing you want to grab is Devouring Blade, so then you can attack 3 times per action. And with after all of that stuff, you wind up with some ability scores that look like this. That is the fastest I could get through that without completely cutting him short. Now we gotta dive into the more mid-range combatant with the Dwarf Shaman. And I'm now realizing I should have broken up this recording session just like some people warned me about, because my voice is starting to die. So let's go through this fast. Dwarf Shaman obviously is a dwarf, and he's able to attack at mid-range because he's kind of has some martial arts ability, but he has a little bit of range to it. He's blasting out rocks and stuff. But in general, by being a dwarf, he has resistance to poison damage, an advantage against being poisoned, which is mostly because they're really good at drinking. And you also get the feature Dwarven Toughness, so you get an extra 1 hit point of health every level. For the background, I want to focus on his ability to drink, so I wanted to go with Sailor because it gives you Tavern Brawler, and Tavern Brawler is, you know, you're in a tavern, you're used to brawling, which allows you to do unarmed strikes for a d4 damage plus your strength modifier, and you can push a creature when you attack them with an unarmed strike. You have proficiency with improvised weapons, and whenever you roll an unarmed strike damage die, you can re-roll any one that you roll. But he's a little bit better at martial arts than just that, because he's either attacking with a hand axe or with his fists, or shooting out rocks or elemental damage stuff. So we're going to be diving into a monk. Monks get the feature Martial Arts, which got a massive update in the 2024 handbook that came out. So it gets more damage, starting at a d6 of damage, and you can use your dex modifier for your attack and damage rolls. And that's going to be important because our ability scores are going to look like this, focusing very heavily on dexterity. And that's even better because since we see him use a hand axe, which usually requires a strength type of attack, and it's usually a pretty minimal amount of damage, martial arts overwrites all of that, because any simple or martial weapon that would be considered light allows you to use your dexterity modifier for it, and you can replace the damage die with your martial arts die. And that martial arts die is going to upgrade as you level up in monk. Also at first level of monk, you get unarmored defense, so your armor class equals 10 plus your dexterity modifier plus your wisdom modifier. At second level of monk, you get monk's focus, so you get a number of focus points equal to your level in monk, which you can spend on things like flurry of blows. And because you have martial arts, you can always attack once as a bonus action for free. But with Flurry of Blows, you can attack twice by spending 1 key point. You can use Patient Defense to take the Disengage action as a bonus action for free, or spend 1 key point to take the Disengage and Dodge action as a bonus action. Or you can use Step of the Wind, so you can take the Dash action as a bonus action for free. Or if you spend 1 key point, you can take the Disengage and Dash action, while at the same time doubling your jump distance. And you can run further at this level, because at second level of Monk, you also get Unarmored Movement, boosting up your speed by 10 feet. Which also upgrades as you level up in Monk. And you can regain some of your focus points at level 2 because you get Uncanny Metabolism. So when you roll initiative, you can regain all of your focus points if you want to, while at the same time regaining some hit points equal to whatever you rolled on your martial arts die, plus your monk level, which is a solid amount of self-healing. But you can only use the Uncanny Metabolism feature once per long rest. And also you're at the medium range of the attacking stuff that's happening. So you need to have a little bit more defense, and you get deflect attacks to help with that. So as a reaction, you can reduce any attacks damage against you by 1d10 plus your dexterity modifier plus your monk level, which is a ton of reduction to damage. And if you reduce it to 0, you can spend 1 key point to redirect that attack to somebody else. At third level of monk, you get to choose a monk subclass. And we need to focus on the ability that he can just blast out types of elements, and he's medium range. He can shoot those rocks out when he's punching. So we're going to take Way of the Elements. And I should warn you, this got a massive improvement in 2024. It doesn't suck anymore like it did in the old player's handbook. It starts off by giving you the feature Elemental Attunement, which makes it so your unarmed strikes are able to do damage 10 feet further away than normal, like you're shooting out those rocks. And when you hit with an unarmed strike, you can deal elemental damage instead of just your normal punching damage. And on top of all of that, when you hit a creature, you can force them to make a strength saving throw. And if they fail, they're either pushed or pulled 10 feet further or closer to you. And on top of everything else, you get access to the Elementalism cantrip, and your wisdom modifier is the modifier you use for the spellcasting. 4th level of monk gives us an ability score improvement, so we're going to boost up our dexterity by 2 points. And also at 4th level, we get the feature slow fall, which is actually something that the dwarf shaman can do, reducing his damage from falling. 5th level gives us extra attacks, we can attack twice per action, and it gives us stunning strike, so when we punch a creature, we have a chance to stun them, and even if we don't stun them, we reduce their speed and force advantage against the next attack against them. 6th level gives us empowered strike, so now we can deal force damage with our unarmed strikes instead, and we get the feature Elemental Burst from being an elemental monk, so you can do AoE elemental damage by spending 2 focus points, dealing up to 3 rolls of your martial arts die worth of damage on a failed dex save, or half as much if they succeed. 7th level of monk gives us evasion, so if you have to make a dexterity saving throw to not take damage on an attack, you can actually reduce that damage by half automatically, and if you succeed on the dex save, you reduce it all the way to 0. 8th level of monk gives us another ability score improvement, so we'll throw 1 point into dexterity and 1 point into wisdom. 9th level gives us acrobatic movement, so you can actually run across vertical surfaces and across water, which again was another thing that Dwarf Shaman could do. It's almost like he was just based off of a monk, which he probably was, because I'm pretty sure the writer of Goblin Slayer was a huge D&D player. 10th level of monk gives us heightened focus, so now your flurry of blows can actually deal 3 attacks instead of just 2 attacks as your bonus action. Your patient defense is going to give you some temp HP, and your step of the wind allows you to bring somebody else along for the ride. 10th level also gives you self-restoration, so you can stop being charmed, frightened, or poisoned if you need to. 11th level gives you stride of the elements, so if your elemental attunement is active, you actually get a fly or swim speed if you need it. And then at 12th level of monk, you get another ability score improvement, so we're going to boost up our wisdom by 2 more points. Now it's time for a multi-class, because we need a bit more stuff, because he has the ability Stupor, allowing him to spit out a bunch of mist across an area and stupefy a bunch of enemies, and he has more elemental attacks. So I'm going to be diving into Druid. This immediately gives us a primal order. We could have something like Warden, so you get more weapon and armor proficiencies, but we don't want any armor from being a monk, so instead we're going to choose the Magician option, which allows us to add our wisdom modifier to any arcana and nature checks, and we get to learn an extra cantrip, and Dwarf Shaman can actually move around some earth if he needs to, so we're going to grab the cantrip Mold Earth. You also get some spell casting, but we're going to jump into that in just a second, because we need to choose our subclass first, because it's going to be pretty important. You can do things like Wild Shape, but we're not going to use that for transforming ourselves. We're going to use that for any other options like regaining spell slots and stuff. And then at 3rd level, we get to choose a Druid subclass. And he's just focused on doing elemental damage and shooting out elements, and so we're going to choose the Circle of the Land. When we choose a Circle of the Land, we get to choose a type of land we align to, and we're going to choose the Temperate Land. This gives us access to some spells that we really needed access to. So now we can dive into the spells, because we needed Stupor. That was kind of a thing that I just wanted to make sure we didn't forget about. And because we have access to the circle spells from the Temperate Land, Circle of Land spells, we get access to the spell Sleep, allowing us to cast Stupor on a whole bunch of goblins. We get plenty of other spell casting to worry about though. We have Magic Stone to shoot out those stones when we need to, Absorb Elements. We also have Create or Destroy Water, which I wanted because there's actually a random point where he is able to help concrete dry faster. So destroying the water in there would make that happen, I guess. We'll grab Long Strider, Jump, and Fairy Fire, which just helps out the whole party with Fairy Fire. We'll grab Earthbind and Gust of Wind. 4th level of Druid gives us another ability score improvement. So since we already have most of the ability scores we really care about, we're just going to grab Crusher. So when we deal damage of the bludgeoning type, which most of our unarmed strikes can be as long as we're not turning it into elemental or force damage, we can push a creature 5 feet away on top of our Tavern Brawler stuff. And because we're dealing a bunch of attacks, thanks to being a monk with our Flurry of Blows and all the other stuff, we can actually also get Enhanced Critical. Because with all of those attacks, we have a higher probability of scoring a critical hit. An enhanced critical makes it so that way when we attack a creature and we deal a crit, any attack rolls against that creature have advantage until the start of your next turn. Then 5th level of being a druid gives us access to 3rd level spells, so we'll grab more elemental stuff with Erupting Earth, Tidal Wave, and Sleet Storm. 6th level gives us natural recovery, allowing us to regain some spell slots when we really need it. Basically, we're taking all of the very limited spell casting that Goblin Slayer enforces on its show and throwing that part out the window. And 7th level of Druid gives us access to 4th level spells. So we'll just grab Control Water because nothing else really fits at this point. And we also get the future Elemental Fury. So when you deal melee damage, you can actually do more damage once per turn with Primal Strike, dealing an extra 1d8 elemental damage. And then at 8th level of Druid, you get another ability score improvement as max level of the Dwarf Shaman overall. So we're going to grab another epic boon, and he still takes a decent amount of hits. So we're going to take the epic boon of Fortitude again, giving us an extra 40 hit points of health and making it so our healing's a little better, and we can throw 1 more point into wisdom. One more character to worry about, and it's the High Elf Archer. And I really appreciate some of these naming conventions just making it really easy for me to choose a species, because obviously we're going to choose an elf. And as far as elven lineage, which you get to choose drow, wood elf, or high elf, her name is High Elf Archer. This gives us access to the Prestidigitation cantrip, which I'm surprised I can even say at this point because I'm recording an insanely long time at this point. But whenever you finish a long rest, you can actually swap that cantrip out for anything else on the wizard's spell list if you want to. And this gives you other spells at higher levels because it gives us Detect Magic at level 3 and Misty Step at level 5. Then specifically because we're a high elf, we get to choose 1 more cantrip. So we'll just grab Message because nothing else is going to fit with the character that much because she doesn't do a ton of spellcasting. When it comes to the background, she's technically a noble, which would be great, but nothing about the noble background would help build this character in any way, shape, or form. So instead, I'm actually going to go with Guide, and she tends to guide the rest of the party. She's actually a really good scout. So that's going to be my justification for taking this background. It gives you skill proficiencies in stealth and survival, and it gives us the magic initiate feat, which has to come from the druid spell list. So we'll grab guidance and resistance from our cantrips and fairy fire as the 1st level spell. Then when it comes to ability scores, we're going to have a point spread that looks like this. Then when it comes to the starting class, we're going to be similar at the start with what we did with Goblin Slayer, but it's going to divert pretty heavily pretty quickly. So we're going to be starting with a ranger. I mean, we definitely want to make sure she's good with a bow. She's literally got archer in her name, and rangers are just kind of known for that. This gives us some spells right away, and she's so good with a bow she can actually fire off multiple shots simultaneously. So we'll grab a spell like Hail of Thorns to rain down more arrows at once, Snare to set a trap for any goblins that are going to come your way, Ensnaring Strike to hit a creature and then wrap them up and just completely taking them out of the battle. At 1st level of Ranger, you also get Favored Enemy, which we already covered, which gives us Hunter's Mark by default, and we can cast it a certain number of times for free. And then the last thing you get at 1st level of Ranger is 2 weapon masteries. We're going to obviously focus on a longbow to start, because that's what she shows up with. This gives us the weapon mastery feature, Slow, so you can slow down an enemy when you hit them with an attack from your longbow. But shortly after teaming up with Goblin Slayer, she realizes the error of her ways because goblins tend to fight in close quarters, and that's really hard to manage with a longbow. So she switches over to using a short bow pretty regularly. And so we're also going to grab weapon mastery with a short bow, giving us the feature Vex, giving advantage on the next follow-up attack after we hit a creature with an attack from your short bow. 2nd level of Ranger gives us Deft Explorer, so we can learn a couple languages. We'll make sure to grab Dwarvish because we got the dwarf in our party, and then you also get expertise in 1 skill. So we'll make sure to grab the Perception skill, and this will give us expertise in that one. 2nd level of Ranger also gives us access to a fighting style, so we're definitely going to go with archery. It gives us an extra +2 to our attack rolls, which boosts our general accuracy. And then at 3rd level of Ranger, we get to choose a subclass again. And again, we're going to go with a hunter. This again gives us the feature Hunter's Lore, so we can understand a bunch of immunities, resistances, and vulnerabilities for anything that's under the effect of your Hunter's Mark, but we'll again get Horde Breaker from the Hunter's Prey ability, which allows us to attack a second creature within 5 feet of a target that we attack with our first attack, but we can only use this feature once per turn. And considering you're one of the attackers that's going to be on the back line, you are definitely going to want to rain down that arrow, and you're known to be able to attack multiple targets simultaneously. So this only amplifies that effect. 4th level of Ranger gives us an ability score improvement, so we'll boost up our dexterity by 2 more points. 5th level of Ranger gives us extra attack, so we can attack twice per action. And we get access to 2nd level spells, and she is definitely a scout for the party. She's good at lockpicking, finding traps, and all of that stuff. So we'll grab the spell Find Traps and Pass Without Trace to boost up our stealth checks. And we'll grab Magic Weapon to just boost up our general weapon attacks, which gives us an extra +1 to our attack and damage rolls. 6th level of Ranger gives us Roving, so we boost up our speed by 10 feet, and we have a climbing and swimming speed equal to our walking speed. 7th level gives us Defensive Tactics, so again we'll take Escape the Horde, and it's actually probably more helpful for the High Elf Archer than it is for Goblin Slayer, because Goblin Slayer likes being in the middle of it and just attacking the crap out of all those goblins. High Elf Archer just wants to get away from them, and Escape the Horde makes it so any opportunity attacks against you are going to be at disadvantage. And then at 8th level of Ranger, which is going to be the last level we take in Ranger, we get another ability score improvement. But we're actually going to take a feat, and we're going to take Sharpshooter. I don't like the changes that have been put in for Sharpshooter in general, but it is very relevant for this character. It boosts up our dexterity by 1 more point. It allows all of your range attacks to ignore half and 3/4 cover. Firing at long range is no longer done at disadvantage, so you can fire a shot really far, and especially helpful for fighting in caves against goblins. And the whole reason you switch to a short bow is firing in melee, because when you attack with a ranged weapon and there's a creature within 5 feet of you that's an enemy, you're automatically attacking at disadvantage. But the feat Sharpshooter gives you firing in melee, so you can actually ignore disadvantage on ranged attacks within 5 feet. Now I want to focus more on her scouting abilities and also make her a bit more of a sniper. So we're going to go ahead and multi-class, and we're going to multi-class into Rogue. This gives us expertise in 2 skills right away, so we're going to boost up our stealth and our sleight of hand checks. We get access to sneak attack, so if there's an enemy of your enemy within 5 feet of them, you can go ahead and deal extra damage as the number of d6s on a giant chart, which upgrades as you level up in Rogue. Or if there's not an enemy close to them, you can also have advantage on the roll, which is actually a lot easier to do with all the weapon masteries and extra attacks that you have. And speaking of weapon masteries, you get another weapon mastery from being a rogue. And she has a bunch of daggers lined on her legs, so we're gonna grab daggers. This gives us the weapon mastery Nick, so we can make an offhand attack, and instead of using our bonus action, we can actually make it part of our action, freeing up our bonus action for other stuff. And you can use those bonus actions for other stuff like Cunning Action, which you get at 2nd level. So you can use your bonus action to dash, disengage, or hide. 3rd level of Rogue allows us to choose a Rogue subclass, and I want to focus more on some of the core abilities that she has and not like assassinating stuff or anything like that. So we're actually going to go with Thief. This gives us the feature Fast Hands, so we're much better at lockpicking. We can actually use a sleight of hand check for lockpicking now. You also get the feature Steady Aim, so if you really need to make sure you have advantage on an attack, which is very helpful for your sneak attack damage, you can use a bonus action to make sure that you have advantage on the next attack. But you can only do this if you haven't moved on your current turn, and it makes it so your current speed is 0 until the end of the turn. But jumping back over your thief stuff, you also get second story work. So you have a climb speed equal to your walking speed, which you already had from being a ranger, and you can use dexterity for your jump distance, which is an interesting thing to force into all the calculations you got to do in D&D. At 4th level of Rogue, you get an ability score improvement, so we're going to boost up your dexterity and wisdom by 1 point each. 5th level of Rogue gives you Cunning Strike, so when you would get your sneak attack damage, you can forfeit one of your d6s to add a different effect, either poisoning them, tripping them, or allowing you to withdraw from combat. Also at 5th level of Rogue, you can spend your reaction to uncanny dodge something. So an attack that would hit you, you can cut that damage in half. 6th level of Rogue gives you expertise and 2 more skills, so we'll grab investigation and survival. 7th level of Rogue gives you evasion, so you can actually dodge out of the way much better, because anytime you would have to make a dexterity saving throw to avoid taking damage, you automatically take half damage, and if you succeed on the saving throw, you take 0 damage instead. 7th level of Rogue also gives you reliable talent, so now any skill that you have proficiency in, you can't roll less than a 10, which is frankly a very overpowered ability. 8th level of Rogue gives you another ability score improvement, so we'll boost up our wisdom by 2 more points. 9th level of being a thief rogue gives us supreme sneak, so you can forfeit one of your d6s from your sneak attack damage to not become unhidden when you attack, which is frankly one of the best options for a cunning strike most of the time. Because if you're always attacking from the shadows and nobody can find you, that's pretty awesome. Then at 10th level of Rogue, you get another ability score improvement because rogues get a little extra. Now, usually you can't get a fighting style from being a rogue, and you can't get a fighting style feat from being a rogue because a fighting style feat requires you to already have access to fighting styles. But since you had started as a ranger, you can get a fighting style now. So we're going to choose defense. We don't have a lot of other things we need as far as ability scores, and defense will just allow us to boost up our armor class by +1. And considering the high elf archer usually just sticks with leather or studded leather armor, that'll be pretty helpful. Then 11th level of Rogue gives us improved Cunning Strike. So you can actually do 2 Cunning Strike options on 1 attack, but you still have to spend the sneak attack die for each of them. Then at 12th level of Rogue, you get another ability score improvement, but this is max level, so you get an epic boon. And we're going to choose the boon of combat prowess. This allows us to boost up our wisdom by another +1, and we get the feature Peerless Aim. So when you make an attack roll, you can just make it hit. You just won't miss, period. But you can only do this once per turn, but that means you're still guaranteed to hit once per turn, which means you're more than likely able to use your sneak attack damage once per turn, and probably your Hunter's Mark damage once per turn. Not to mention you also have Horde Breaker, so you're probably getting an extra attack out of this. Overall, it's just a great little way to finish off that build. And it's the best way to finish off this entire party. I can't believe I decided to actually build the entire party, but frankly, I love this show. I love all the characters in it, and there's no way I'd be able to focus on making an entire video just about the High Elf Archer. So making an entire video about the whole party seemed like the right idea. There's character sheets for all of these linked in the description down below, and if you made it all the way here, I hope you roll 3 nat 20s, and I hope you can really do plenty of goblin slaying.